With Black Flag Resynced releasing in just under 1 month, I think it's fitting to go over the complete origin story of Edward Kenway from his time in England all the way up to the events at the start of Black Flag. This video will not contain any major spoilers for Edward's story in Black Flag, as most of the information for his origin story is explained in other media. So with that said, I just want to say a quick thank you to my channel members for their extra generous support. And also, if you want to stay up to date with all the lore for Black Flag Resynced when it releases, then please subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Edward Kenway was born on the 10th of March 1693 in Swansea, Wales, as the second child of Bernard and Lynette Kenway. His older sister had died in infancy, leaving Edward with no real memory or knowledge of her, as his parents rarely spoke about the loss. When he was 10, the family moved to a farm near Bristol in southwest England. Although the quiet countryside suited his parents, Edward struggled to adapt and quickly earned a reputation as a rebellious troublemaker during his teenage years. At the age of 17, Edward met Caroline Scott, the daughter of a wealthy tea merchant. Their first encounter took place outside the Ord Chalet Tavern, where Edward stepped in to protect Rose, one of the Scots' family maids, from an assault by Tom Cobley. Caroline witnessed Edward's actions and caught his attention immediately. Edward was instantly drawn to her and asked if they could meet again, but Caroline declined, knowing her father would never approve. She had already been promised to Matthew Haig, the son of a high-ranking East India Company executive. Even with the divide in their social standing, Edward refused to give up on her. Through Rose, he discovered that Caroline often visited Bristol's port, and he came up with a plan to impress her. He hired a young street boy named Albert to deliver flowers in his place, only to realise too late that the boy intended to rob her instead. Edward rushed to intervene, but Albert had already snatched Caroline's purse. The theft caught the attention of Matthew Haig and his large bodyguard Wilson, who quickly captured the boy and began beating him. Edward arrived just in time, overpowering Wilson and forcing Albert to apologise. Caroline was impressed by Edward's courage and determination, and later that night she met him outside his home. During a quiet midnight walk together, Caroline admitted how much she dreaded the future expected of her as Matthew Haig's wife and the rigid role society demanded she follow. At the same time, she understood that a relationship with Edward would bring her father's anger down on them both. Despite the risks, the two continued a secret romance over the following months, eventually marrying in 1712, with Edward at the age of around 19 and Caroline being around 21 years old. Caroline's father, Emmett Scott, strongly disapproved of her marriage to Edward and in anger disowned her without granting any dowry. Cut off from the Scott family wealth, Edward and Caroline moved into the Kenway family farm. Bernard and Lynette quickly grew fond of Caroline, who genuinely tried to adapt to her simpler new life. Edward, however, became increasingly frustrated. Farming never suited him, and he hated being unable to give Caroline the comfortable life he believed she deserved. As his dissatisfaction grew, he neglected his responsibilities as a husband and spent more and more time drinking in local taverns. Late one night in 1712, while Edward was heavily intoxicated, Emmett Scott approached him in a tavern with an offer. If Edward agreed to leave Caroline and send her back to her family, Emmett would pay him a large sum of money. He tried to pressure Edward into accepting, but Edward passed out before giving an answer. Taking advantage of the situation, Emmett brought him back to the Kenway farm so Caroline could see firsthand what he considered Edward's failures as a husband.
A despicable display. This tosspat is a ruined man, Caroline. Unfit for life on land, much less at sea. If he goes to the West Indies, it's you who'll suffer.
Father! Father!
The following day, Edward confronted Emmett and rejected the offer outright. Instead, he proposed a different arrangement. Determined to make something of himself, Edward planned to travel to the West Indies and earn his fortune as a privateer, promising not to return to England until he had become wealthy. He pointed out to Emmett that such a dangerous life could easily end with his death, leaving Caroline free to remarry, while his absence would also give Emmett the chance to turn her against him permanently. Emmett agreed to this new deal, and Edward later revealed his decision to Caroline. Hurt and furious that he would leave her behind, she abandoned the farm and returned to her parents' home.
Oi! Where you going, the market?
No, My parents have asked me to come live with them, and I'd like to.
Oh, what do you mean, live with them? You live here with me.
I'm sorry, Edward, but my father is right. You had a decent wage when you worked the farm. Why can you not be satisfied with that? With me?
Decent wage? That job was near as, damn it, to robbery. You want to be married to a peasant the whole of your life?
All right, Edward. All right.
You leave now, Caroline. You'll never know what's coming to us. Caroline! Caroline!
Unknown to her, Emmett had no intention of leaving matters there. On the night Edward was meant to set sail, he secretly sent Wilson along with several members of the trade organisation, including Tom Cobley and a man named Julian, to burn down the Kenway farm while Bernard and Lynette slept inside. His goal was to destroy any chance of Caroline ever returning to Edward's family. Edward's departure was delayed and he managed to return to the farm in time to warn his parents. He pursued the men responsible for the attack, but was eventually ambushed and knocked unconscious by Wilson. When Edward woke briefly, Wilson forced him aboard the ship that was set to carry him away, assuring him that no further harm would come to his parents as long as he honoured his agreement with Emmett. Although Edward had saved their lives, Bernard blamed him for the chaos brought upon the family and ultimately disowned him. Edward sought revenge against the men responsible. In the process, he killed Julian and attempted to interrogate Tom Cobley, only for Wilson to kill Tom before Edward could get any answers. Edward then challenged Wilson directly, but the more experienced swordsman eventually overpowered him. After being knocked unconscious once again, Edward awoke aboard the Emperor, the very ship he had been destined to sail on. While serving aboard the Emperor, Edward quickly found himself targeted by the ship's harsher and more experienced sailors, especially a brutal crewman named Blaney. What began as a simple intimidation soon turned personal as Blaney grew to despise Edward for refusing to fear him despite the constant harassment. Not long into the voyage, Captain Alexander Désilets realised that the War of the Spanish Succession was nearing its end, which would soon leave privateers without work. Seeing the change coming, Désilets announced to the crew that he intended to turn to piracy. He offered any man unwilling to embrace piracy safe passage home, but the promise was a lie. As Edward prepared to join those choosing to leave, another sailor named Friday stopped him. Moments later, Edward watched in horror as the men who had chosen to depart were thrown overboard instead. In January of 1713, the Emperor attacked and captured a British merchant vessel known as the Amazon Galley. Edward and Blaney were ordered to guard the ship's captain, Benjamin Pritchard. During the encounter, Edward noticed that Pritchard wore a ring identical to the one owned by Wilson. Pritchard offered to answer Edward's questions in exchange for protection, but before Edward could learn anything useful, Désilets executed the captain himself. At the same time, another privateer captain, Edward Thatch, arrived with his crew to defend the Amazon Galley, still remaining loyal to the British Crown. Realising the battle was turning against them, Blaney chose to betray the Emperor's crew and mutinied, killing First Mate Trafford before turning on Edward. Rather than killing Edward outright, Thatch took an interest in him and proposed a fight to determine whether he deserved a place among his crew. Edward was forced into a brutal brawl against Blaney. Although Blaney was far larger and physically stronger, Edward's speed and agility allowed him to keep up with the bigger sailor. Early in the fight, Edward managed to land several solid blows, but Blaney eventually gained the advantage and in desperation pulled a knife. The moment he broke the rules by drawing a weapon, Thatch ended the fight himself by shooting Blaney dead on the spot. With Blaney defeated, Edward earned Thatch's respect and was welcomed into the crew. Under the guidance of Edward Thatch aboard the Sea Dog's Bite, Edward Kenway began developing the skills that would define his future as a pirate. Thatch himself trained him in swordsmanship and pistol combat, while the experienced pirate Benjamin Hornigold also helped shape his abilities. Edward spent the next 6 months in Jamaica learning the realities of life at sea. However, the signing of the Treaty of Utrecht in early 1713 brought an end to the major conflicts between Europe's empires, leaving British privateers without purpose in the West Indies. With legitimate work gone, the crew of the Sea Dog's Bite fully embraced piracy. Okay, so this next section is the events from the Dead Man's Gold storyline and the Caribbean Sea 1713 storyline from Assassin's Creed Rebellion, which in the lore is an Abstergo product. With that in mind, the following events regarding Rebellion may or may not be canon, considering Abstergo may have altered the events, but I will go over it regardless. Anyway, wanting to prove himself to his new companions, Edward volunteered to lead the hunt for a rumoured Spanish shipwreck, said to contain a fortune in treasure. Alongside several fellow pirates, he travelled to Kingston in search of information. Once there, they located a Spanish sailor who knew the wreck's location. After protecting him from Captain Blount, a British officer also seeking the treasure, Edward escorted the sailor safely back to the Sea Dog's Bite. Once they escaped Kingston, the sailor revealed that the wreck lay somewhere in the Bahamas. Unfortunately, Blount and his men reached the site first and escaped with the treasure chest before Edward's crew arrived. Refusing to give up, the pirates tracked down Blount's nearby camp, infiltrated it, and successfully reclaimed the chest. Before they could flee, however, Blount's ship launched an attack on the Sea Dog's Bite. As British soldiers boarded the vessel, Edward fought to defend the ship while sending 3 fellow crewmen to board Blount's ship and eliminate the captain himself. The pirates ultimately succeeded, defeating their attackers and finally securing the treasure from the Spanish wreck for themselves. Sometime later, Edward joined 3 other pirates on a mission to recover a stolen ship belonging to their friend who was called Garnet. The vessel had been taken by the crew of Captain Cliff. During the search, they encountered Groggy Bill, a former member of Cliff's crew and an old acquaintance of Edward's. After some persuasion, Bill revealed the location of Cliff's hideout. When the pirates arrived, Edward split from the others to track down Captain Cliff personally, while the rest looked for Garnet's ship. They soon discovered the vessel had already been destroyed during a battle between Cliff's crew and the Royal Navy. The British, meanwhile, had been searching for a mysterious map that was believed to lead to an enormous treasure. Unwilling to return empty-handed, Edward and the others attempted to steal the map from the British Captain Stewart, but he managed to escape before they could capture him. Tracking Stewart to a military camp, Edward's crew used an attack from Cliff's revenge-driven pirates as cover to infiltrate the area. During the chaos, they witnessed Stewart fleeing into the jungle and pursued him deep into the wilderness. The chase eventually led them to a strange hidden vault, where they confronted Stewart and his remaining soldiers. After killing them, the pirates searched the vault only to find no treasure inside. Even so, Edward sensed that the place held a far greater importance than it first appeared. Believing the vault could become dangerous if others discovered it, he decided it would be best for Nassau's growing pirate republic if its existence remained secret. Around 1714, Edward encountered the pirate captain Abel Brammer after the man arrived in Nassau. Although Thatch immediately disliked Brammer, Edward chose to join his crew regardless, signing on board Brammer's brig, the Jacobite, which leads to the events at the start of Black Flag in June of 1715 with a 22-year-old Edward in a naval battle just off the coast of Cape Bonavista. And that is the origins of Edward Kenway. I just wanted to thank you again to my channel members for their support, as it helps out more than you know, and thank you to everyone for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I also hope that you have a great rest of your day.